Hi there. I wanted to take this opportunity to have a quick look in the crystal ball of Joe O'Mahoney. For those of you that don't know me that well, I'm a historian by training, although I now focus, my specialism is consultancy, and I still keep up to date and read a lot of socio-economic history. So I wanted to give some reflections about the impact or the opportunities for the new normal that will be coming, which isn't just a result of COVID. It's a result of many pressures or trends that have been happening in society that I believe COVID, the 2008 recession and climate change are going to manifest massive changes in society and the economy more generally. So if you think about what's happened in history, what you typically get is long-term trends or pressures, socio-economic changes or pressures that very often don't affect change unless there is a crisis that make those manifest. So there's been plenty of trends that are happening socio-economically in society. I'll look at three of these. So this is the percentage of GDP in tax havens that you can see has gone up from 4% in 1996 all the way up to 18% now. This is US national debt. This was prior to COVID, of course, so this will have increased exponentially again. Obviously 2008 to 2011, massive printing of currency in the US and bailing out of banks and other large institutions. And another major pressure is income inequality, and you can see that the top 1% here have benefited massively since '79 compared to the vast majority of society. Now these have created pressures, and we saw some of those pressures being manifested in complaints after 2008, primarily with complaints about the large institutions, the big banks, what academics would call financialized capitalism. COVID has created another crisis, and I think following this crisis we're going to see over the next 10 years significant change. And the three crises that I believe are going to manifest this change are the 2008 recession, which in some countries lasted to 2018, COVID, and the forthcoming threat of change, which is climate change. What these have done and will continue to do is really put pay to the idea that there is small government, or that there should be small government, and that government can keep out of the workings of society. Government has had to show leadership, and this is quite interesting because governments, as well as consultancies and business schools, as you know, tend to be demand led. They tend to go for what their clients, their students, or their citizens think is best. So governments tend to do focus groups before making any policy decision in view of what is going to make them more popular and thus get them voted in again. Consultancies tend to do what their clients think they want. This isn't always the case, rather than what their clients actually need. And business schools tend to produce courses that they think will be popular for their students, rather than ones that will necessarily be the best for those students. Certainly in terms of government, government has been forced to do things that are unpopular and to take leadership. And this is a relatively new role for government. It was done in 2008 in terms of big spending, but it didn't really affect, or it was hard for people to see a direct effect on their lives. With COVID, there's a clear direct effect on their lives. But people in the main are obeying that leadership. And this is going to be an important lesson for governments and citizens, in terms of redefining their relationship and the amount of leadership that they expect from government, which I hope is going to be useful in terms of the dramatic changes that are going to be needed to mitigate climate change over the next 10 years. The other big revelation of the crisis is that science works. There's a senior politician in the UK who argued that that people had had enough of experts. And this chimed with Trump's obviously post-truth argument that the fake news, any science he didn't like was fake news. But politicians have had to be led by science. Eventually, with COVID, if you don't do what the scientists say, it leads to deaths, and we will see that countries, including the UK, that have ignored either politically or through ignorance what science has said will pay the price for it. And again, that chimes with the future changes for the climate. The other big change is that we found the magic money tree. After being promised that post-2008 spending, there was no magic money tree. Governments all around the world have managed to find the magic money tree, and people are rightly going to be asking after this, if the money tree could be made available for COVID, why can't it be made available for social inequality, climate change, and other things that lead and will lead to more deaths than COVID? Another big theme that this crisis has provoked is that Homo economicus is dead. This is the favourite of economists everywhere. And what we have seen is a vast number of people, especially in the health services, not acting in their own interests. And in fact, people in society helping out their neighbours, ensuring that masks are worn, and generally inconveniencing themselves for the greater good. This firstly builds social solidarity, which is useful in affecting change, but also more specifically in this argument highlights the way that people don't always act in their rational self-interests. COVID is going to lead to social inequality in a much greater way than 2008 recession led to social inequality. So what we've had is the inefficiency, the COVID inefficiency, the gap between the rich and the poor worsening over time, but this is going to exacerbate it for fairly obvious reasons. And that's going to create a lot of pressure from the populace for change in governments. There has been pressure, but the idea that governments are yet again going to have to bail out large institutions is going to be frowned upon by the populace, and demands will be made for change. So what's all of this got to do with consultancies and business schools? Well, I think that there is a choice ahead of, and it's not obviously, you know, I've got two choices here. You could have 8, you could have 3. But my point is that generally there are 2 forms of change that could come out of this. One of them is I've highlighted all the worst things, and on the other I've highlighted the good things that require leadership from the business community and business thought leaders. So on the bad side, we've got a rise in nationalism, we've got protectionism associated with that, we've got anti-immigration rhetoric, and that's an easy one for politicians. You know, you can see what's happened in America and the UK in terms of ringing that bell or blowing that dog whistle, as people like to phrase it. Public cuts, again, it would be easy and cheap for politicians to argue that the answer to the COVID spending and the 2008 spending is fairly drastic public cuts. I personally don't think they're going to have the balls to do this, simply because health services around the world have been underfunded for years, especially in the UK, and anyone that tries to cut public funding of health is going to be in a lot of trouble. The other potential threat is that we do nothing about the climate, and the final threat is that governments who have now become more dominant, having to take leadership, tend towards autocracy, and you can already see that around the world actually, where governments that have used COVID to as an excuse to adopt fairly draconian measures against the populace and democracy. However, there is a choice here, and I think that the consultancies and business schools have a role to play in promoting the benefits of internationalism and international institutions. Obviously, COVID highlights the way in which nationalism doesn't work, that you need international institutions and communication to fight against this type of thing and other global challenges such as global recessions or climate change. there is an alternative take. There's an alternative. There are alternative theories to the neo-classical approach to cutting after spending. Modern monetary theory and environmental and social and governance funds really highlight the possibilities for spending in an era of low interest rates and with the possibilities that have been opened up by central banks in effect purchasing government bonds. The possibilities have opened up for spending and government leadership really where it's needed. And my view is that the new Green Deal provides a great opportunity for achieving that. This would in effect be the green version of Roosevelt's New Deal that was done after the last calamitous depression in the States. And also there's an argument here that democracy could be strengthened coming out of this, of that the political institutions that have got us this far have shown themselves to be frail and showed themselves to be quite limited. And so there are arguments for strengthening democratic institutions and to some extent improving democratic institutions to prevent the rise of autocracy and nationalism. So I guess the message that I'm giving is that I would hope that consultancies and business schools and other socio-economic thought leaders would be pressing their clients and governments and representative institutions to pursue the ideas that are on the right-hand side of the page rather than the left-hand side of the page. And that's not because it is just the good thing to do. That is because the evidence is, and I believe very strongly, that the right-hand side of the page is going to take us to a long-term, stronger economy, and the left-hand side is going to severely damage the economy, perhaps irreparably. Anyway, those were my thoughts. You may or may not be interested, but I guess if you've got this far, then you were interested. So I thank you for listening. Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye bye.